This episode of Radcast Outdoors is brought to you by PK Lures, Bow Spider, and High Mountain Seasonings.
Fish on! Hey, Radcast is on.
Hunting, fishing, and everything in between. This is Radcast Outdoors. Here are David Merrill and Patrick Edwards.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up because, I mean, that's what Al Linder said too when we had him on the show, is that, you know, if he could have one lure, I mean, he's picking a jig. And, you know, I learned this from my fishing mentor, Danny Kurtula. He's got almost 1,000 muskies in his career. He's fished all over the place, and he still swears by the 1/8 ounce marabou crappie jig that you can catch a fish just about any place at any time of year on that jig because, like you said, you can mimic just about anything you want. And we've caught, you know, nice bass and trout all year round and walleyes and just about anything that swims. And jigs are just so versatile because you can work them high, you can work them low, you can work them in the middle of the water column. It just depends on what you want to do that day, you know, and you can present it how you want to. So that's really cool.
And, you know, people forget to, when a fish, you know, from its early spawn, when it hatches through the first couple of years, you got to remember a lot of those fish, it's imprinted in their mind. People always ask me, like, hey, big baits really do perform. They do unbelievable on lakes that are unpressured by other anglers, but is the forage of what big fish eat. So if you go out there and you're fishing a big bait right, you're going to catch big fish. But that bigger bait also, the receptors of a big fish, the predator, it keys in quicker. So my worst enemy of fishing big baits is myself. Because if I work the same way, the same action, the same thing over and over again, it doesn't take long to become a Pavlov's dog, and the bass go, oh yeah, that has the wrong signature. I'm not going to get hit again. When you start going down in sizes of baits to the micro stuff, 4-inch worms, the little crappie jigs, little beetle bugs, little crankbait, it's impressioned in those bass, big fish mind. They lived off that, you know, half their lifetime, and it's always imprinted. And I did something years ago with my dad. I did a theory. I used to tie my own rods, fly rods, and I used to do my own hand-tied jig or hair jigs. And my favorite one was a hare's ear nymph. I always made hare's ear nymphs. I always caught all kinds of fish with it. And I said to my dad one time, I said, man, I'm doing it on like a small size, like 22, you know, like really small stuff. Cause I was young at the time and I could see. Now I got to walk around with glasses because I'm blind as a bat. We went to the lower lake and I tied up a size 1/0 and 2/0 hare's ear nymph. I made a nymph that was this big and I was stripping it and I started catching bass left and right. And I learned a long time ago, there's certain shape, size, and signature that the bass will always key in on fish as a meal. There's no negative to it. Even though the size increases, there's no negative to it. But when you start throwing big stuff, hardware, the big jointed swim baits, and there's a certain clack to it, and the hook's doing it, you'll catch big fish on it, but be real careful not to condition big fish with big baits because you can ruin your bite. People don't know here. I hope they don't listen to this podcast. I really don't. The guys I fish against, because if there's a tournament this weekend, I will go up to Cast Stake and Pyramid and I will throw big baits and I will purposely kill the bite. So the most that they could do is get lookers on the weekend. And I still go back and fish the standard stuff and kick their butts. And I'll come in with a big bait on the rod. And I go, man, I stroked them on big baits. And they're like, we do it all the time. And when I go out there, I put the big bait rod away and I throw out my little fairy wands and I catch all the fish in my little jigs and my little swim baits and stuff. And they're not the wiser. So there's a line where that's looking through the fish's eyes and understanding what they see and feel and hear and condition, that the 1%ers will understand what I'm saying.
Yeah. That's really cool perspective. I appreciate that. I just want to talk about another sponsor here real quick. High Mountain Seasonings. We all like to eat. At least I know I do. And High Mountain Seasonings makes eating that much better just because you get to put this incredible seasoning on fish. I was doing some just recently. We took the kids out and we caught some rainbow trout and we were using that wild trout seasoning that I love so much. Had some of that, and then a couple nights later we had gone crappie fishing. Bill, you'd be happy about this. We went crappie fishing. We just absolutely hammered the 11 to 13 inch crappies, and I'll tell you what, man, putting the Bayou Bass and the Cajun Cowboy and some of those seasonings on there and making fish tacos, it is so dang good. I mean, we just annihilated some crappie the other night and some walleye too.
There's a level of satisfaction that is garnered from going out in the field and procuring any protein. I don't care what it is, whether it's turkey, whether it's big game, whether it's fish, coming home, prepping that meal, seasoning it and cooking it and having be something better than you can get in any 5-star restaurant, right? That level of skill is not that hard, right? It takes a little bit of elbow grease, a little bit of work. You got to get up early, like Bill's saying, and you got to have some practice of sharp knives and watch some. Now we have YouTube, so you can watch YouTube of how to gut, skin, fillet, whatever. But putting that protein on the ice, bringing it home, sprinkle some High Mountain seasoning on it, and put it on the grill. The level of satisfaction when you plate that for your friends and family, you won't ever get that from going to the grocery store, buying some tilapia or buying some beef and putting it on the grill.
Yep. And Father's Day weekend, we had my dad over, and the kids, my kids were like, telling Papa, Papa, that was my crappie that I caught, or, that was my walleye. I mean, they were all over that, they were real proud of it. And so again, High Mountain Seasoning is just such a great company based here out of Riverton, Wyoming. We're really glad they're a partner with us. Just proud to be a part of their family, and they're part of the Radcast family. So give them your support. You can go to highmountainjerky.com. It's HIMTNjerky.com. Get a hold of some of that and enjoy your summer. Have a good fish fry. I mean, they've got videos on their website too. And so that takes me into the next question, Bill. If you could eat any freshwater fish, what are you going to eat?
Well, I'm going to come back around to High Mountain Seasoning. They picked up and they helped Katie Carey for the Big Bass Championship. So she got some product and stuff. And I tell you what, it is the bomb. She handed some stuff out to the other anglers and kids over there in Missouri this year. I was fortunate enough to get some. And weird part is, growing up, my dad was a chef. So I was fortunate enough where my dad could just go into the kitchen and we didn't have nothing and he could put stuff together. But when you do have the right seasonings, the flavors and stuff, it's like a chef in a bottle. It's when you bite into a steak or fish or something like that, and that flavor just overwhelmingly hits that button of like, wow, this is 5-star. How did you do it? And then the real smart people like my dad, if he had high seasoning, he would never tell anybody. He would hide it in his back pocket and go, I just throw some stuff together. Oh my gosh, it's the best thing I've ever eaten. But food, I love steak. I mean, that's the thing. But for hunting, we did it when I was kids, but for fishing, as a fireman, I was a PC, a permanent cook for 18 years on the fire department. I cooked a lot of meals for 20 plus people a day, lunch and dinner. So I had to put some meals on. One of my favorite, when I brought it in, if I caught like a big striper or a halibut and you cleaned it right and got the bloodline out of it and everything else and prepped it right, man, any good fish, like fish tacos, street fish tacos, homemade coleslaw, your pico de gallo, a little Frank's on top of it, beer batter was always a win-win for any type of fish for the fire guys because it just takes to another level. But if you're looking healthy, sweet street tacos, I'm telling you, striper, halibut with the high seasoning stuff, you put that on there, you put it on a nice fresh tortilla, you warm it up over the stove, you put your coleslaw, pico de gallo, little mayonnaise, avocado sauce on top of it, and just sit back and enjoy it and get fat off of that stuff. So halibut, striper, I lived off of that a lot with my dad when we were growing up. And like I said, you can't beat the seasoning. I tell you what, it does take it up from a notch of just regular salt, pepper, and garlic.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. That's like the base. That's what I told my kids. I said, if you're ever cooking and you need a base seasoning, you need your salt, your pepper, and some garlic powder. Like that's like the base of everything. Anything beyond that, you're starting to delve into different flavors. The kids, they really like it now. When they were smaller, they didn't really care for the heat so much, but now they're starting to like a little bit more of that heat. So like if we have like that Cajun Cowboy or something like that, it kicks it up a little bit. They're like, man, that's really good, Dad.
I'm telling you what, and here's a plug to High Mountain Seasoning. There's a time with friends and family, kids and everything else, when you do, like you said, you go out, you have a great day with the family, you catch some fish like crappie and stuff, and it's a sweet fish. but you come back and you have your fish fries. You're at the campsite. You're at your house. You do this, and you go from the hook to the clean to the catch to feeding. Your kids, I kid you not, what's being imprinted in their minds is with high mountain seasoning and cooking food the right way and giving it that kick is you're going to have a legacy, because those kids, when they get older, they're going to have kids, and you're going to go fishing, and they're going to go, oh, you should have had the fish tacos my dad made, and he had this seasoning. Well, it's high mountain. Guess what? I have some here. And they're going to be able to bring back their experience that you're showing your kids now, 25 years from now, and giving it to their kids and going, oh my gosh. So it's amazing. Fishing brings us together as a family, but cooking also, and the flavors and the traditions in that will last a lifetime. So a company like that's jumping in for the outdoors with High Mountain, man, you got to give them kudos.
Yeah. And, to your point, supported Katie, all we had to do is just say, hey, this is what's going on. They're like, yeah, we'd love to support something like that, because they believe in that, right? That's just the kind of people they are. And you're right. Like, some of my best memories growing up, cooking walleye, cooking perch, different things with my dad, and then having a big family meal, where you get the entire family like around the table. You might have 2 tables because all the kids, but you get everybody there and you enjoy it together. There's nothing better than that. Same with David, he does that with the elk. I mean, there's just something about sharing that and then telling the story of catching the fish. Cause like my daughter, she uses one of my favorite all-time baits, which is like a number 8 X-Wrap. Like, that thing catches just about everything. It's such a good bait. And so she was telling Papa about, working that thing and catching crappie, and then catching a smallmouth, and then catching a walleye. It's like she was so proud that she was doing that, and she got to help fillet it. And so she was talking about filleting the fish. And so that's the kind of stuff that just makes what we're talking about and what we're doing so special.
So, talking about techniques and bass behavior, what are some things to think about seasonally to help people catch more bass?
You know what? I've written stories. I've sat down and talked in lengths with like Linder and Roland and a bunch of guys in fishing on how I break things down. When it comes down to what you're going after first. First of all, you got to figure out your species that you want to target. Then you got to look at the water. So I'm always looking at the entire water column, top, middle, bottom. Doesn't matter if I'm fishing for lake trout, bass, crappie, bluegill, catfish. I'm trying to find the body of water I'm going to do. And I go to simplistic. It's basically how I grew up in the fire department when we did brush fire fighting. I'm always outside looking at the mountains and looking at chimneys, draws. Which way does that fire go up? Where's a position that would kill us in a fire situation, right? And if you're smart enough and understand that that's a draw and that's a chimney and that's a spur and that's a ridge line and that's a flat, and this is where it clicked in fishing. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's everything that's under a water line. And then when you look at growing up hunting, you're always looking at where's the draw? Where do they feed at? Where's their sleeping zones? How's their ridge line? Where do they sit on the backside of the wind blown eddy? To smell. Like, there's everything kind of morphed into fishing. So it's all relatable. I could talk to you guys about hunting and come up with stuff where you're going, holy crap, we didn't even think about it that way. And into fishing. But when it comes down to it, you want to be able to use a lure or look at a body of water simplistically. Every bit of the water has potential to catch a fish. Any shoreline bank, anything that you could add to the contour, the structure of that body of water is an added point value. It increases. So if you have a plain bank, it's 1. You could always catch fish there. If you walk down to a point, that's 2. That's a higher potential because you have a place where something's going to hit, run up a ridge line, come down, feed, everything else. If that point goes into a creek channel, it's a 3. So everybody that asks me is like, hey, what's the easiest? What do you do? Look at structure and cover elements, standard, what's under the water that's consistent. And then I go and I just look at the bait fish. What are they eating? What are they going to chew on today? Did they plant trout? Are they chasing trout? I'm going to put something that's matching the hatch. Is there a mayfly? I'm going to do that. If you get lost in fishing, go back to the basics. Pick up a spinning rod with a small hair jig. You can fit and go and find the best looking places along the body of water, from a golf club pond to a little river, anywhere where you go. oh, that's fishy. That's where the fish would stay. That's where they're going to eat. You start fishing, and it all comes down to time on the water. Just like you hunting, you become better when you become one of the land. You become part of it, and you can feel it. You can feel the pressure change, the wind change. You're going, oh, it's getting rut time. The deer are going to get up. They're going to start moving in about 20 minutes. The low light, the golden hour. Fish, everything does the same thing. And a big deer, honestly, when you look at it, you'd be a really, really big trophy deer. You could put that same pattern. If you put water over that entire place that you're hunting, big fish will almost exactly do the same thing. Come up to the same apple tree, the same time in the evening to get it, but know that they can escape quick because there's an escape route on the backside of it. It's all the same.
Those big game, any of them, turkeys, anything, they take and inhabit 90% of the game, inhabits 10% of the cover, right? I think those fish are going to be the same way. You got 90% of the bottom of water, but 10% of it is going to hold the majority of the fish. And it's going to be around those structures and those key features that they like.
Yeah, it's awesome.
So going back to that, like, I think about my home body of water, and I'm like visualizing everything as you say it. I'm like, well, that's why we catch fish at that spot, and that's why we catch fish at that spot, right? But when you're evaluating a body of water, you like you said, you're kind of giving it like a scoring system. I've heard Al Linder kind of talk about that too. If he's evaluating a brand new body of water, some of the things he looks at. Talk about how the seasons affect that too, especially with bass, because like let's say it's a pond, and there's not a lot of structure. What are some considerations that a person should have when pursuing bass based on the seasons?
Right. So like I said, if anybody ever really sat down and read the book that Jones and I wrote way back, in 2005, come up with a lot of that. So anything stationary, hard, is your structure cover elements. Cover elements under the water line can be seasonal. So when I look at a body of water, I got to look at the time of year. Is that time of year going to grow grass? It's going to grow coontail, tules, lily pads. Is that going to be another point value or a position where those bigger fish will stay, and it's an easier place to target? So when I look, our local lake here, Lower Lake Castaic, it's like you said, it's a bowl. It's pretty much nothing. It goes out from the bank. It does like a 45-degree shot down from like 12 foot down to 30 foot, and it's just kind of just barren. And less is, when you look at something like that, less is more. And I'm going to tell you a secret what I do. On this lake, depending on how the sun rises and sets, you got a plane of ecliptic. So the sun comes through the air, the sky at a certain thing. Summertime, it's more ahead, above us. Winter times, you have a lower angle, depending on the plane of the axis of the earth and the sun. Consistently, every day, because things change like 15 minutes, tidal water, everything changes every day. But guess what stays the same? It's shadows, okay? So if you have a clear 3 or 4 days, when that sun comes up, it's going to create shadows. And those shadows can be as stupid as a tree on a mountain a mile and a half away. But the shadow of the tree cuts across that bowl, that water. That shadow is as hard as the shoreline. Bait fish will position themselves in a shadow, even in 100 foot of water, and the bass will eat in open water. But if that shadow comes up to anything and crosses point of hard or soft structure, which is like a dock, there's a plain bank with the dock, but you see a shadow coming up to that because of the way the sun's hitting it at a certain time, your percentages are going to increase exponentially. Like it is mind-boggling that it's like a tidal water. Like you fish high tides, low tides, shadows are the same thing in every body of water. I would say if people pay attention to shadows, it is so magnificent where it will take you in a whole different world and learn how to sundial yourself. Which if you stand there and you guys are about 6'2", 6 foot or so, depending on the sun angle, you can sit there in a boat on shore or anywhere else, and you can see the length of your shadow on the ground and where it's positioned. So even though the whole body of this bowl is, it's all lit up with the sun, if you find a place where it goes from 12 foot to 16 or 18 foot, there's a drop, you can pretty much figure out how that shadow is working visually in your mind underwater just from sundialing yourself. And you could put yourself in a position to fish the shadow edge in 18 foot of water and catch more fish than everybody out on the water because you understand certain elements move, keeping, hunting, fishing, everything. There's other things that move and push bass around than just bait fish. So, like I said, I'm a freak. I'd say, hey, show me your body of water, and I'll start showing you stuff that I see that you're going to go, I never thought of that. Okay, that's totally different. And it comes down to taking notes. A kid on the shoreline, what I did at Cast State, take a piece of paper, take a lure that drops about a foot a second, and create your own graph, create your own depth chart. That's what I did when I grew up. We didn't have we didn't have anything. I'd throw a jig out, and I'd count it 1 to whatever, and that was my rate of fall. And then on those lures, I would sit there, and if I counted like 5 seconds and it went 10 feet deep, swim baits, I'd pull them out, and I'd put a 10, I'd draw on the back of the tail. And I knew that precision. I knew what every bait would work at what depth, on a count drop. So precisionally, I could see underwater everything my bait's doing. And when I did get hit, I could tell you where in the water column they hit it, how they hit it, the position of they hit it when I was a kid. And that's the things that it's easy to say, hey, what's the easiest thing to go out there? No, it's going to be some work, time on the water, take a lot of notes, and draw a map. Draw your own map. And when you do that, not only do you become the student, but you're going to turn back around. And when we do a podcast on Radcast Radio 5 years from now, you get to maybe be the teacher. Mm-hmm. You know, that's the difference. It's always try to prepare yourself to be a teacher, to teach somebody, but get the knowledge behind you in your back pocket of really what happens, like what is really going on. So it was a loaded question, but yeah, man, this is all cool.
Yeah, I try to come up with loaded questions. It's more fun that way. But here's one that I like to ask, and you know, I'd love your feedback on it. Is what are some of the things that most anglers do wrong when they're looking for bass? Like, what's the number one thing that you're like, you know, don't do that. You know, do something else. Like, what's the number one thing that you see is like, whoops, that's probably something you shouldn't be doing.
I think Dave brought it up earlier in the podcast when he says there's a point in time where you just want to do it competitively or repetitively so much time that you're finally going to catch something. You know, like, hey, I'm going to go elk hunting. I'm just going to keep doing it. And if I do 100 stocks, I'm finally going to get one. I think what most people forget, all anglers, they take the time on the water to the thing where I'm just going to go out there and just keep throwing, and I'm going to eventually catch a fish. I would tell every angler from this point on, when you go out there, you are not allowed to make one cast. You cannot throw your rod at all. You have to sit there and you got to go through 5 or 6 elements in your mind. Am I in the right place? Do I have a right lure to create the illusion of realism of what that fish is targeting? If I make this cast, it's like chess moves. You make one move, you better be thinking 8 steps ahead. If I make this cast, is my lure going to get stuck, or can I bring it through that pile of trees or rocks? If I do get hit, can I hook the fish and get it in? The biggest thing is for everybody, slow down and make one cast. Remember I tell the story, it's going to come full circle, about the trap and skeet. And my buddy George goes, how many tournaments are you going to shoot? And when I finally said 800, he goes, now you're onto something. Everything has to have a perfect reason why before you do it. If anglers start doing that and just don't go down and put their bucket down and just start fishing and sit there and look at the water, look to see if one side has more shadow, see if there's bird activity with blue herrings and egrets or loons or cormorants in a pocket. Are there coots over there? Is there brush line? Is there grass? The time of year, you have to sit there and go, you have to check off marks and go, okay, now where is the best place to go? You go to that location and go, now you sit there and go, what is my only one cast? If I can only make one cast and fish it right, this one cast, is it going to be the right one? Guess what? Your confidence level, when you do that to a person, and they don't know this is what I do all the time, my confidence is I know I'm going to get bit because I am the bait fish. I am in the right place at the right time to get killed. Here's the whole thing. It's one cast. I have so much confidence to the landing of my lure to my rod tip with this one thing that the confidence blows people's minds. That does some awesome stuff. But if I don't get bit on that one cast, I still have 800 tournaments to go. That one disappears. I recalculate what happened. I turn it back around. I make one cast, and I start over. And that, I'm telling you, if people could wrap their minds around that, there's going to be a whole lot of fish being caught. And they're going to be able to see it, but they're going to be able to go back and show their kids and say, Dad, why are you throwing that number 6 Rapala? Why are you throwing right there? Well, there's a break line, and it goes from 8 foot up to 4.5 foot, and there's a rock right there, and there's a stick I put there when I was a kid, so it has a little cover and stuff like that. And if you throw at this angle, you're going to bring it right up to it. Right when you feel your line getting tight, that means your Rapala is getting right by that wood stick. I want you to stop it there, let it hang. I want you to do a couple twitches, because that's what the bait's going to do. It's going to flare, and then just hold on. And when that fish hits it, you're not going to really pull in real quick. You're going to load the rod because you want the fish to turn around from that tree and come out. And it's going to go out this way, out to deep water, and then you're going to be able to come in. You can visually paint every step of the picture, and when you're able to do that, you're in the BBZ world. I mean, it's a whole different Oprah. So
yeah, that's awesome.
You guys are like, oh, this guy is crazy.
No, I totally get what you're saying. Like, it makes a lot of sense, actually. Because you have to think about it differently. There's a lot of guys that go out there and fish, but not a lot of them that actually are successful. And it's because they're not paying attention.
I'll give you a good example. Great guy, Mike Jones and George Kramer. George Kramer was a local rider down here for One Bass for years. Tournament angler, covered Bassmasters, the whole thing. I wrote the book with Jones, and he was proofing the book and stuff, and I had a part in it called CSIing. And he goes, CSI, what's CSI? And I go, I CSI my plastic baits. We went out and did a photo shoot. I ended up catching a 10-pounder on film with George at a lake I don't usually fish, in front cover of a magazine and stuff. But I was throwing old style, like Optimum swim baits, all plastic. And I was so crazy. If I threw a new one out and I knew there was a rock out there 25 feet, and I'm in a bad position where the sun is maybe behind my back or at an angle, and I had to throw 90 degrees to this rock, I'd throw out, I'd count down as I'm bring it in. Here's your rock. Your line would come up over the top of the rock, so your bait would be here as you're bringing it in through the water column as a pendulum, and your line would start getting tight. You could feel it getting tight on the rod, and you go, oh, so you're using that as like a tuning fork. You're feeling the bait coming into that rock. You go, oh, and then you get close to the rock and you do a directional change. Or right before the directional change, you get thumped. Boom. And you reel set. You reel down, 25-pound string, big reel, load the rod. You have a fish on for a second, pops off, and you go, oh, crap, I lost it. Well, people would just bring it back in and throw out again, right? I bring it in, I take a look at that bait, and I start looking at the plastic, and I'm like going, okay, this is how it was going through the water column. It was pendulum into this rock. I get hit. I set the hook. I have the fish on. What do I see on this bait? How did that fish hit the bait? What position was that fish at? 25 feet, 40 feet away from me, 25 feet down. I look at it, and on the bait, it's all rubber. They're like the Optimums. They have a line tie. And on the front part of the line tie, the plastic is ripped this way because bass have gristle, right? Mm-hmm. It's ripped this way. How did that happen? The bass was facing away from me. He was on the rock looking out. The bait fish came up. He ate it. I pulled real hard. The line came out of his mouth, wrapped over his head. When I pulled, because his lips were right at the knot for the jig head, it pulled the bait backwards out of its mouth. So I could actually tell you what angle that friggin' fish hit at 25 feet deep, 40 feet away from me, by CSI, looking at the bait marks, the half moon marks. If you had a half moon mark and you had bit and you came in and you saw the dome, first of all, is my hook in the right place? No, because if they're going to hit at this angle, I have to put a trailer hook back here, because when they hit the bait and turn it sideways, when I pull it this way, now the treble hook's going to come out and get them in the side of the lip. So I know, like, oh, I got to reposition my angle. My next cast, if this bass right now is faced this way, that's a pattern now. In that depth, in that cover, this is the way the fish are positioned. This is how they want to hit it. How do I adjust my bait to get the best hookup ratio? How do I position the bait to get the best hookup where it's not being pulled out of their mouth this way, it's being pulled sideways or straight forward? So being able to calculate that up in one cast takes you to a whole new level where you're like, these fish got nothing on me. like I'm gonna jack them up. And then when you do miss them, you ask why. What did you do wrong? Lure placement, mechanics, body position. You know, do you guys play baseball?
I play softball, yeah.
Yeah, so in softball, is that not a follow-through? Do you set up softball like you do trap and skeet? When you set up for skeet, you always make sure you start off in a position where you're going to follow through with your follow-through. And then you coil back into your shot, so that way you follow through and you don't hiccup, you don't stop, you don't tighten up the spring. Baseball, you always want to look for your follow-through and then come back and set, so you got a perfect follow-through. In bass fishing, you want to hear a big mistake on big baits and fishermen? Their body mechanics are completely wrong. If they're sitting there and they're using a right-hand reel and their body position is where they have to pull to the left, that side, you're pulling the reel handle out of your cranking reel. So mechanically, you opened up yourself, your core. That means you have to close your core down to get back to the reel, which means you loosen your line. You don't have any pounds per square inch on that hook. So your baseball stance in fishing is reversed. You always got to look on how do you do a reel set where you could reel and bring the reel into your hand as you're setting. For every reel, you're looking at 24 to 38 inches, depending on your gear ratio. What type of line, how much stretch, what size rod, how does it bow up? Get that point started, and you got to pull 1/8 of an inch to get that hook because it's swallowed by a monster fish. You got to pull it to the barb. Just getting the point in is one thing. You got to get it past the barb to lock them in. So just mechanics of body position for most anglers, they're losing half. Oh, I got hit, but I lose the fish. You're not setting up for the hook set. So there's so much into fishing, like so many different layers. But that's one of the biggest things is think your one cast approach, but when you get hit, always be set up for the hook set. And then you'll always have the opportunity of saying, I got this one, instead of, I got hit and I lost this one. You're like,
yeah, no, it makes total sense.
No, I'm still stuck back on the analogy of watching the fire column and the smoke for big game and then going, wait a second, that's going to work underwater the same way. Water and smoke are going to travel right? I mean, just so if I wanted to go catch a 10-pound bass, a largemouth somewhere, what state should I focus on? I've never caught one, right? Where would you send me to go catch one?
I'll tell you the truth. I bet you, except for a few, I did this report like 25 years ago with Jones. I bet you pretty much every state in the U.S. has potential for a 10. And the reason, and this is how you break it down. How long has the lake been there? 1. So you have to have time where everything is it's in the upswing. It's got good balance. It's got good bait fish. Everything. The ecosystem's prime. 2, do they have largemouth? Now, I will say you want a 10-pound largemouth, but a 6-pound smallmouth is still like there. And everybody has always asked me about a 10-pound fish. Like, you have to have a 10-pounder to have a trophy. I'll throw this out there. Bull crap. Your biggest fish, if you caught a 4-pounder, your next biggest fish is a 5-pounder, so this opens it up. That terminology is going to open up fishing to everybody across the U.S. because 3/4 of the country is going to say, we don't have fish over 10 pounds, so we'll never be able to accomplish that. Well, I know half the guys who say they're big bait fishermen here in California will go to your state and they will never catch a smallmouth over 5. So that's all relative. But look at the body of water. Look at the size, the fish of the predator. If there's largemouth and smallmouth there, do they have trout? Do they have salmon? Do they have some type of, we call them vitamin T, vitamin trout back in the day? Do they have a forage there that they plant that creates Pavlov's dog? So most of the lakes, I bet you even Wyoming, when the water temperature gets down to the 70s or something like that, they start doing trout plants. Well, when they do trout plants, and if there's bass in that lake or big walleye, it takes about a month or so of consistent trout plants every 2 weeks. Or every 3 weeks. There's consistency. It takes about a month or 2 for those big fish to go. Pavlov's dog, they will be at the launch ramp when that bell starts dinging, coming down with the trout. Seen it for years. So look for those elements. Those are the key things. The right size fish, are they in the lake? Do they have the right forage? And you got to be there at the right time. When they plant trout, it's got to be within probably the first week where you have the best shot of catching a monster fish. Tell me right now, guys, Wyoming, how many lakes have you gone to? And everybody has the story. Oh, I take my kids over to this trout lake. I've fished it for years, but it really sucks because you catch these trout and all of a sudden a big bass will come up and eat the trout off your line. And no one picks up a swim bait and fishes for bass in the lake because they're all keyed in on it's just a trout lake. Yeah. You know how many lakes are like that throughout the U.S.? Hundreds of thousands. You hear it over and over again. And you hear that the best ones, the old timers, they're sitting there, yeah, those big bass, every time I try to get a trout, they rip them off my line. I would be researching every lake in my local area going, oh my gosh, top secret place. I'm going to go there when the weather changes, when we get kind of like a drop, good moon phase, they plant trout. and I'd be out there sneaking around, not telling anybody, and I would be throwing the biggest bait possible and watch your life change when you see stuff that you've been fishing forever and you change a couple little elements and you go, oh my gosh. Hey Patrick, you know that pond we've been fishing for 25 years since we've been a kid, and they plant trout every year? It's like, we never throw on swim baits. They have bass in there. I just caught a 7-pound smallie and a 9.5, 10-pound largemouth. Yeah, you can't tell anybody or I'm going to kill you. It's there. So there's bodies of water in your area in Wyoming. There's bodies there that have monster walleyes that you over 10 pounds.
Yep.
They probably plant trout in those lakes too.
Yes, they do.
You ever throw swim baits for walleyes?
We talked about that. What was it, a few months ago, and I haven't done it yet. I got to do it.
Because it's so far out of some people's realms.
Mm-hmm.
How many other lakes there have big smallmouth and largemouth that trout are planted that they fish the lake just for a trout, to get meat, trout. How many of those up there? I bet you there's quite a few.
Yeah, there's a few for sure. And, I think I mentioned to you the last time we were talking, is like, you catch like a 19-inch walleye that's got like a 10-inch stalker rainbow in its stomach. Well, I mean, they're keyed in on that big bait, right? And I was telling David on our previous podcast, my son, he noticed that there were, little rainbow trout dimpling by the boat ramp because they had just planted them. He dropped a PK spoon down and hooked into about an 11-pound lake trout down on Flaming Gorge, and that thing was just like peeling off the line. He was having so much fun because those predators are in there. They're having a feast.
Yeah, Flaming Gorge. See, so you got the big brown trout, Flaming Gorge.
They have big brown trout, big lake trout, and big smallmouth.
Okay, swim bait capital of the world. Seriously, I mean, that's the ingredients of beyond epic days. And if they have lake trout there, start lead lining and down riggering and get down there in deep water and start throwing 8 to 12-inch swim baits. That's what they're eating all the time. And you guys have never even got to that signature of size form. And the big thing on that clear water and big baits, they have a certain drawing power. And here's some voodoo stuff. Like when I talk about shadows and everything else, when I look through the eyes of a predator, we're predators, right? Mm-hmm. We're alpha. If you're sitting outside, or you guys duck hunt, I know you guys have to duck hunt because you're from Wyoming. I grew up duck hunting, and you sit there in the blind early in the morning, and you're sitting there drinking your coffee, and you're sitting there, and Dad and you are throwing jokes, and the sun's coming up, and you see a shadow go across the water in front of you. As a predator, you go, oh, and you think, where's the sun's coming up? You turn, you look up, and you start tracking the duck, right?
Mm-hmm.
Bass do the same thing. You throw a swim bait on the surface, and it's clear water, the bigger the bait, the bigger the shadow. Which means if you're sitting outside, do you really pay attention to Tweety bird shadows? No. Plane comes by, a hawk, a raven that throws a big enough shadow that catches your attention, you instantaneously, as a predator, will stop, look, you'll spot your target, and in your mind, you guys are doing a lead on it already, because that's what we do. Bass do the same thing. So if you understand where the sun's at, and you throw a big enough bait to create the right shadow, I could fish a 12-inch swim bait for lake trout in zero part of the water, the top, and say it's 60 foot deep. If you have a dark black swim bait that creates the best shadow, at 60 foot, you're going to have a shadow like this going across the bottom. Fish will be eating the shadows. I've seen this for years because the rods and cones of light, when the shadow hits the bottom, it comes back and it creates rods and cones. And it looks like a fish swimming. And you'll watch fish go over and actually eat the dirt. And they'll sit there and look, and then they go, oh, I just got duped. And they'll look up, and you watch the fish come up to your bait to eat it. So
that's voodoo. That is voodoo, Bill.
So understanding that if you have a tree in 12 foot of water, 15 foot of water, and the sun's right, and you do your right angle, you could fish a topwater bait on the surface. Mid-depth, you can cross the shadow across the limbs of the tree, 10, 15 feet down, and then down below at the base of the tree, when it comes out of the shadow, you'll have the bait swimming across the bottom. So I could fish top, middle, bottom with one cast, multiple strike zones in the water column to position fish. If you're really voodoo and smart, you fish with the sun in your face. Because when you throw that buzz bait, the topwater bait, and it hits the bank, right? And you're going to fish like a gut. Mm-hmm. When that bait starts swimming out, the shadow triangulating coming down the shadow will be in front of your lure. That means if there's a fish undercover on a hat, on a rock or a bush, it's looking at the bottom, 20 feet deep. It sees the shadow, it'll come out, strike the shadow or look at it, stop, look up, and by the time he looks up, your bait is coming in their strike zone. One cast concept. You'll watch the fish come up, boom, you catch it. If it's reversed, the sun's at your back, you have to throw multiple times. Because by the time the shadow comes and pulls fish out in deep water, you're already in at the boat. Fish will turn back around, go back in its haunches. You throw it again, comes out, goes back in. The third time, the fish is sitting out there. He goes, I just saw it twice. Something's swimming by. What the heck is it? Now he comes out in the open. He sees your bait fly hit the water. And sometimes you go, wow, I threw right in that fish's mouth because if I could hit the water, it was already opened. Like the mouth was open. You already... So understanding shadows and how to position during the day and the depth, there's so much in the shadow fishing that is like voodoo, but I've seen it and I've done it so many times through the years. It will make you a better everything. And even understanding shadows hunting, trust me, you go out dove hunting and you're sitting there and you got the sun to your back, and all of a sudden you see a shadow of a dove flying across because you're keyed in now. You're looking for the M&Ms, and you go, oh, hold on, Dad, here comes one right now. You know, they give themselves away before they get there. Hunting.
Oh, I was going to mention that, Bill, is, you know, over the last, this will be my 19th season. I was 10-0 the first 10 years and 7-7, right? What changed? I've taken 2 weeks and gone hunting every year. I've gone hunting similar places, right? What's changed is A, the work ethic, and B, just observing nature, observing the elk, learning their patterns and where I'm going to be able to intercept them and where I'm not. And when it's time to just back out and, you know, not giving up is another big key is, okay, so you didn't hook him that time, right? That fish that came right at that hat and you pulled the lure out of his mouth, but you learned where he was susceptible instead of just going, oh, yeah, I lost one. Okay, here's what I need to reposition my hook or reposition the boat, and that next cast, you've got him. Like antelope hunting, we use the sun. Yeah, reposition. Like I've used the sun. Antelope can see at 600 yards, right? We've killed them several times under 100 yards in inch-tall sagebrush by putting the sun right at our back and walking straight at them, and they cannot, right at sunset, they cannot see you.
Yeah, your golden hour. The long shadows, everything blends in together, especially the lower you get to the horizon. Oh, yeah. This is, and that's the fun part. If people make it fun and really start breaking things down, when people ask me, hey, man, you know a lot, Bill. Every time I go out there, when you open up your mind, you see something else. Go, you know, I know I'm close on this, but there's still key elements that I'm missing. I just did a video just the other day fishing the 4-inch shad at Cast 8. I got on a blue herring bite. And I'm telling you, I pull up and I'm just watching this bird going down the bank, and the bird's sitting on the dirt and it turns its head to the side because it's kind of stained water, and it's looking down the edge of the dirt and the water. It's looking in a strike zone 2 inches off the bank and 2 inches deep. And I'm like, oh man, that blue herring is fishing the funnel, the edge, just like I need to fish. And on film, I go, I'm going to fish. I threw in 2 inches of water. I said, it's the dirt pattern. I throw the swim bait in 2 inches of water, or on the dirt. I bring it in 2 inches of water, and I'm reeling down that edge. So that strike zone for the blue herring is the exact same strike zone for the striper and the bass. People get in a boat, they just chunk and line. They throw to the bank and bring out. If they have a fish follow them out, just like you said, the repositioning. Oh, shoot, I just had a 10-pounder follow me out. You know what I see everybody do? They keep throwing to the bank. You know how many tournaments I've won where I told my partner, like Troy Linder or something, I'm like, hey, you see that guy on the pint? They're throwing big baits. Watch them. And you see them throw one time and they bring out, they go, you see them crouch down and they got a follower. And then all of a sudden they're like, oh, and they throw 2 or 3 more times. And I go, Troy, if they leave, we're going over, we're going to put our boat in 4 inches of water on the inside of the cut. We're going to throw where their boat's at. We're going to get the big fish of the tournament. Okay. They take off, go over. The fish were pulled out from where they really wanted to hit. The boat itself is a shadow. Those big fish will come into the back end of their boat and kind of sit there and just chill out because where they want to eat is getting hammered by a big bait. The boat leaves, creates turbulence. I come in, I sneak in, I throw out where the boat is. I bring a bait and pendulum it back into the strike zone. So now I take that follower that they had it's following my bait, but I'm creating the illusion of realism. And now that bass goes, that's the bait I followed out. I'm going to push it back up to where I eat. And I come in like 4 inches of water, 10 feet in front of the boat, stick an 8-pounder, we catch big fish at the tournament, we leave. And then we tell somebody, oh yeah, we caught it on a drop shot. I didn't want to tell the guy that we beat that we took all his money. Like, oh yeah, we saw you miss that fish. We went over and caught your fish. That hurts. Hurts them. So
No, that's awesome. You've definitely taught me something with that, because I hadn't really thought about the shadows as much in that regard. And that's like, oh, well, that makes a lot of sense. So thank you for that. That's been awesome.
I'll show you a video. I'll send you a video of me fishing human shadows for crappie. We had a class for the women of the outdoors on a pond that's a bowl. And I stood on the bank for 20 minutes like this at low light to create a shadow. And I just stood there, and every crappie in that area came over and positioned in the shadow. And I caught 50 crappie in a row with a crappie jig and a bobber in my shadow. I created my own soft structure.
That's really cool.
Makes you wonder.
Well, it's like you said, you've been observing the fish, and you figured out, what are they keying in on and why are they keying in on it? And that's really what separates the men from the boys in the sport, right? The best anglers from those who are just out there, and it does make a difference. I did want to talk to David, you being a bow hunter, Bill, David's got a really cool product, and it's called the Bow Spider. And he's been traveling around to 3D shoots and different archery challenges around the country over the last few months. And he's about to head out tomorrow morning. But David, just tell Bill a little bit about the Bow Spider.
Well, it's a universal bow packing and storage system. It works with any bow and any pack on the market, but it does so much more. It'll work in your truck, on the headrest, or on your wall, or up your tree stand, on your hip belt or your hip, and then on the top of your pack. So hands-free riding a horse, e-bike, mountain bike, four-wheeler, but safe, secure storage. Grab your bow and go anywhere. We just had the opportunity to sponsor a 3D course at the Northwest Mountain Challenge, and we set up a course called Everest by Bow Spider, and it was 4.7 miles, 2,000 feet elevation, and it was definitely a course that if you didn't have a Bow Spider, you were going to want one. And if you had one, you weren't going to want to forget it, because it was, we had a tournament on that same course, and some of the tournament archers hate me because I spent the time, 3-4 days setting the whole course, setting the shots, setting the animal in nature where I thought they'd be standing on this razorback ridge at 60 yards, and you're shooting at a 50, 60 degree uphill angle, right? And these tournament archers with their 30-inch stabilizers and their 38-inch axle bows are hating me. But every hunter that came off those courses said absolute best course of their life. The most realistic. You come around a corner, here's a bedded doll ram in the scree rocks at 66 yards. You can't get closer because, boom, you're out in the open, your cover's gone. It's time to make the shot or go home. So we've had a lot of fun doing that. We're going to do some more. We have new products coming. But, yeah, we're going to be at a couple more TACs, Total Archery Challenge, just have a booth set up, showing people what the product's all about.
See, so years ago when I shot archery, I'll tell you a couple of stories. You're going to laugh. My uncle was phenomenal. He built longbow. He was a longbow shooter, showed me how to shoot a long time ago. And I was one of the kids that I'm right-handed technically, and I kept missing the target. And he was so pissed until he found out I'm left-eye dominant. So I'm a left-hand bow shooter, but I'm right-hand pistol. And once they figured that out, that was part one. It's like, okay, cool. Years go by, I get in the fire department. A good buddy of mine, Mike, hey, let's go shoot these 3Ds. So we got into shooting 3Ds, and we go shoot this 3D course. Same thing. Starts like 8 in the morning, ends at 5 at night. It's like a 10-mile walk. And at the time, we just went to carbon arrows. So they're super expensive. We got away from all the old stuff, the overdraw with the release. I got all the bells and whistles. A lot of guys are out there with longbows. But when they did the 3D targets, they also put a metal plate around your kill zone. So if you didn't hit in one of the kill zone spots, you just hear this ding, and there goes like a $25, $30 arrow. And all day long, you just found, there must have been $100,000 of broken arrows that we just passed around on. And there's hundreds and hundreds of shooters. So I was in one of the back courses, and you're going to love this. So we go through, and I'm sitting there, my buddy's going, Bill, man, you're right there, man. You're top 5. If you get this last shot, man, I think you're going to be up. We go, we're all in this line, and they put this antelope. It's all flat, and you couldn't use your rangefinder at this time for this part. So it was all instinct and everything else. And it was a miniature animal. Like, the guy messed with everybody. And there's 100 guys in front of me, literally. And the guys went over, and you see them draw and let go, and they're either 4 feet below it or 10 feet above it. No one hit it. The old timer that was in front of me shooting the longbow, he walks up. He helped put the range together. So this guy kind of knew. So he had the advantage. He pulls back his longbow. He sticks this sucker. I'm 50 feet, 50 guys behind him. He goes up, pulls his thing. Everybody misses. I come up. My buddy goes, Bill, if you hit this thing, he goes, I think you're going to be in third. I'm like, okay. I draw back, and I center punch the 10 ring. And everybody's like, holy cow, how did you pull that off? So I didn't go straight to the animal. I did all these walking around and high-fiving. I did this stuff, and I got my arrow. I took off. And I took third, and the old timer came over, and he goes, okay, how did you figure out the yardage? And I laughed at him, and I said, I had 100 people in front of me. I said, every time somebody went up to hit their arrows, I counted their steps. I said, you're the only one that hit the thing dead on. I knew it was 44 yards. Because his drawback, the tip of his arrow on a longbow, he just pointed at the top of the arrow, and it was 40 yards straight. That was his mark on. He laughed at me, and we were going to go into a shoot-off. Well, they had a Robin Hood shoot-off where it was timed where the animals popped up and you had to draw and shoot. He put me to shame. I couldn't get my compound with my release. I got like 12-1 and just destroyed me and put a whooping on me. But it was that in shooting, and I know where you're getting with it. It was so cool because the answer was there every shot. 100 guys in front of me and 100 guys behind me. No one keyed in on how to figure out the problem because everybody was missing. It was as simple as I watched you walk up to the animal and no one else got it. And then I just sat there. I told my buddy at the end, because when I shot, my buddy Mike was behind me a couple and he missed. I didn't tell him because I want to kick his ass. like we were in competition.
Well, if we could sum it all up, I think this podcast comes down to no matter what you're doing, is observation. In the field, observation firsthand. The animal is going to teach you, and the mindset of if you think you're the best, you go out there, the elk, the deer, the turkey, the dove, they're going to teach you. There's something to be learned out there in the field. It's whether you're willing and capable to accept that you need to learn more.
So Radcast Outdoors is not practice makes perfect. It's perfect practice makes perfect.
And take a kid hunting or fishing.
That's right.
Absolutely.
And pass on the knowledge. You just passed on knowledge to me, and I appreciate that. It's like, I think every good hunter and angler is really a product of, again, like you said, the time in the field, but also the people that mentor them along and show them things along the way. We've all learned from some really great people over the years, and I've learned some stuff today, so I really appreciate that. And I did want to throw it out there. How do people find, one, your lures, and two, get a hold of you if they wanted to, talk to you or whatever, or get more information? How do they find you, and how do they find your product?
So the bbz.com, I have a website that I try to post stuff to all the time, and there's always contact information. I try to help everybody I can. Videos, I'm getting back into it again. I got some cool stuff coming down the pipe with the new cameras and systems, but the YouTube is the BBZ TV. So I do all kinds of great fishing human shadows and ocean fishing and halibut and all kinds of weird stuff. There's there. And then the big thing is really paying attention to social media with Fish Lab Tackle. I'm working really hard with them to try to come out with some new product for the fishermen, for everybody from weekend anglers, the youth, to the pros at a reasonable price point, so we can get people out there fishing again and having fun catching big fish. So, you can follow me along or email me at bill@thebbz.com. I got my websites and my social media, and Fish Lab, I'm a big part of that right now too. So there's videos right now. You could go, I think you already saw it, Patrick, where you saw the flutter nymph and the other baits working and stuff. And it's a lot of excitement coming down the line. My big thing is for high mountain seasoning and the bow spider and the PK lures and stuff, because I'm about promoting the industry and the sponsors. Without them, we can't do what we do. Where do we get info on that for our listeners or my listeners to go and look at your guys' stuff? Because I think that's a big deal too.
Yeah, absolutely. So pklure.com is PK Lures, and they've got a whole wide range of baits. They've got stuff for pulling spinner rigs, with worms, for walleyes. They've got cranks, including a lipless crank that I really like a lot. It's a Ridge Rattler. They've got jigs. The spin-a jig is one of my favorites. Then High Mountain Seasonings. You can either Google High Mountain Seasonings or you can go to HIMTNjerky.com and you can find them. And then, of course, bowspider.com. You can find the Bow Spider packing system. You want to buy the full packing system first, and then you can buy extra receivers and different accessories to that as well. But yeah, I really appreciate that, Bill. And again, I'm so grateful that you took the time. I mean, you just spent 2 hours with us talking fishing and mentorship and understanding what fish behavior is. And I mean, you just put on a clinic, man. So just thank you again for taking the time.
No problem. And I heard that the next big elk Dave's going to get, that he's going to send me some really cool elk strap jerky with High Mountain seasoning. that was my, like, that. I want the famous. I heard you have the famous, elk jerky with the High Mountain seasoning. I got to get some of that the next one you get.
No doubt. As long as I keep knock on wood, keep getting out there in the field and getting after it, season's just around the corner, and we have a YouTube channel as well, Bill, with some pretty cool hunts. My dad and I went on a Alaska hunt. We're going to Alaska again. We filmed the Africa trip, but we have a big fall planned. I drew Montana and Wyoming for bull elk. So September I will be chasing elk.
What's your YouTube channel so we can go check it out?
Bow Spider.
Okay. Oh, so it's on that. Perfect. That's easy.
Yep. So just go to type in Bow Spider on the YouTube, and you'll find him. That Doll sheep hunt is really cool. I mean, Alaska is just an incredible place, and he's got a javelina hunt on there. He's got all kinds of stuff. So, yeah, definitely check those out. But yeah, again, man, thanks for taking the time. There's very few people that I know of in the industry that take 2 hours to hang out on a podcast and talk. And so this has just been a highlight for me, man. This has been so much fun.
Awesome. And like you said, make sure you guys send me the link to the podcast, and I'll put a show up, and I'll promote it on my end, because knowledge is golden. And if you get it from the right people that care, like with Radcast Outdoors and the BBZ and Fish Lab, it's going to help somebody who's looking for the help. And that's the biggest thing. A lot of people won't even take the time to do that. So I'm here for you guys, man.
Well, when you get up here, I know Patrick might have a secret walleye spot or two with some huge walleye. So
yeah, we got to figure out how to fish together at some point. I've had a lot of visions and thoughts of coming to California to catch some of those fish with you one of these days. So we got to figure that out.
Don't twist my arm.
Okay. Thanks again for listening to the Radcast Outdoors podcast. We hope that you've enjoyed the show. If so, please go to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you're listening to this podcast and subscribe, share, and give us a 5-star rating, which really helps other people find the show. You can find all of our shows, recipes, giveaways, videos, and much more at radcastoutdoors.com. While you're there, please help support the show by purchasing a Radcast Outdoors shirt or hat. Please don't forget to follow us on Facebook and Instagram. We also have a Radcast community on Facebook called Radcast Nation, and we'd love for you to join in the conversation there. And of course, please help support our sponsors who make this show possible. Thank you again to PK Lures, Bow Spider, and High Mountain Seasonings. Until next time, get out there and enjoy the outdoors.